The journey is almost upon you. But before you start, let us take a trip back. A trip back to where it all began.
The year is 1939. World War II has just begun. A war between everybody, but mainly between Germany, Russia, and the United States. Germany and Russia were trying to find any way to be victorious in this war. That means resorting to any unhumane tactics. October 23rd, 1939. We close in on a small German facility, also known as the Duke facility, but you may know it as Der Anfang. Word has just come in the United States government that a German scientist by the name of Schmidt Wilhelm has been testing on live humans using strange devices in order to enhance the human senses. But the US government isn't the only ones who know about this. Aaron Fitz, an American Marine sent by the United States government to the Duke facility to get a closer look at what was really going on there, as well as giving the orders to kill Schmidt Wilhelm on sight. Oliver Wolfgang, a Swedish journalist whose boss sent him straight into danger just to get a good story to sell papers. Akio Adachi, a descendant of the Adachi family, was sent by the Emperor of Japan, Hirohito, to find out what was going on there, and perhaps may even take some of the secrets in that facility. And last but certainly not least, Ludwig Hans, at the time no one knowing, an ancient being from the dimension known as the Blight, possessing very unique powers, but we'll get into that a little bit later. The four arrive at the Duke facility pretty much at the exact same time, them drawing their weapons on each other, but they're all there for the same reason: to figure out what the hell is going on here. So, they decide to work together. They spent a few hours trying to find a way through the gates, but on their way they find some interesting things. One being a mysterious chest that holds multiple weapons, almost infinite amount of weapons, with a tall glowing beam shooting out at the top. When they finally make their way into the facility, they see it's in ruins, fire burning everywhere.
I guess the Russians have already been here.
Aaron says. For hours, they search the facility and finally make their way into the underground lab. They find horrifying things down there, but most importantly, the undead. Cold bodies with the flesh rotting off their bones. The crew slaughters dozens of them, but they finally find Schmidt Wilhelm's house behind the facility. But when they get into the house, it's too late. Schmidt Wilhelm has already been killed, but by who? The crew finds a last-minute letter that Schmidt Wilhelm wrote. The letter states,
"They're coming. He's coming. I can hear them now. They're banging on my front door. I don't have much time left. Any of my fellow Nazis, if you read this, find my secret plans. They are hidden in the lab. Only you will be able to find them. Please, avenge me."
The crew returns to the lab to find Schmidt Wilhelm's secret plans. The plans state,
"Yes, my precious artifact, the heart of the sea. I've been doing a lot of research on the heart of the sea, and apparently, if I take it back to its place of creation, it gives the one the ability to breathe underwater. It would be a perfect place for a hidden lab. I must get to work on this immediately."
With the crew being stuck in their tracks, not knowing what to do next, they find a strange notebook amongst the dead. A few dead Russian soldiers were slain by Schmidt Wilhelm's Nazi soldiers. One of them had a small notebook, the notebook talking about their leader, Viktor Smirnov. The notebook talked about a castle in Russia, the home of the man named Viktor Smirnov.
Well, I guess this is where we go next.
The crew journeys cross countries for weeks and finally make it to Russia. Moscow, to be exact, where Castle Smirnov resides. But you may know it as Zomikata, the Castle of Hell. When the crew arrives there, the dead have already taken over. They have no idea how this is spreading so fast. They finally work their way up into the Castle Smirnov, a beautiful castle built from the finest stone mined from the mountain. As they look around, they see paintings of the heart of the sea. Alongside a purple stone, and a glowing skull. It's quiet, too quiet, no one in sight. They make their way up to the top floor and find a giant computer. Upon the computer shows a set of coordinates. Before they could read them, they were attacked. 3 big Russian men jumped the crew, throwing them to the ground. Something's wrong with them. Their eyes glow bright purple, and purple veins running through their body. Not undead, but changed. It was the 3 brothers of Viktor Smirnov. Nikolai Smirnov, Vlad Smirnov, and Makarov Smirnov, tasked to protect the castle at all costs.
How dare you enter this castle?
Quickly, Hans sprouts up and starts attacking the brothers. The other crew members join in. First, Makarov drops. Second, Nikolai Smirnov drops to the ground, dead. The crew only had one more in their way, Vlad Smirnov. "Wait!" yells Oliver. "Tie him up. We need answers now." The crew ties up Vlad Smirnov and starts asking him questions. Who is Viktor Smirnov, they ask. What does he want with this Heart of the Sea? What is the Heart of the Sea, the crew asks.
My brother will rule. He will rule over you. He will rule over this world. You cannot stop what is upon you.
Hans puts a bullet right between Vlad's eyes.
Why the hell would you do that?
Aaron yells. That's all we needed to know, Hans says. They head back up to the computer and find the coordinates lead to another German facility. Apparently, the facility is smack dab in the middle of a small village. A village by the name of Holon. The crew worked their way back to Germany, but this time on horseback, so it only took a week. On their way, they ran into countless undead, especially nearing the Holon facility. When they arrived, the place is in ruins as well, flames burning everywhere. But what really caught their attention was the giant beast trapped there with some kind of track leading into its mouth. The beast itself wasn't dead, it was alive, but somehow seduced, asleep. The crew entered the lab to find no one in sight. Viktor Smirnov must have already been here. As they search around, they find many letters and notes from Schmidt-Wilhelm. Apparently, this was also one of his facilities/labs. When they find nothing in the lab, they make their way back up to the top to enter the beast. As they walk into the mouth of the monster, a portal opens up and the crew is sucked in. For a split second, the crew is in some dark, gloomy place. All they see is this big, dark silhouette figure with a skull for a head.
Turn back now. This is your warning.
The portal sends the crew back to the Holon facility.
What the fuck was that?
Aaron says. It does not matter. There, in its stomach, Hans yells. The heart of the sea floating in the middle of the beast's stomach. The crew grab the heart and exit the beast's mouth. Lucky to be alive, they look at each other. For 5 minutes, nothing but silence. We must take it back to its place of creation, Hans says.
Place of creation? Where the hell would that be?
The lost city of Atlantis. For months, the crew searched for the lost city of Atlantis. While searching, they decide to set up a home base, a small nuclear bunker in the middle of Germany. They visit many libraries to find any facts about where Atlantis would be. When it seemed all hope was lost, they enter the restricted section and find a book of mythologies. Halfway through the book, they finally find the lost city of Atlantis, in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. The crew work their way to the shoreline of Germany and find a small cargo ship that they all board and work their way to the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. For hours, they searched and found nothing. For when it seemed all hope was lost, the boat ran into some invisible barrier. The barrier was a small hub hovering over the water. The crew jump inside the hub and find that it leads straight into the lost city of Atlantis, the Sea of Sins. As they enter the water, they can already breathe. Viktor Smirnov has already been here and has activated the Heart of the Sea. The heart they found at the Holon facility was a fake. How can I be so stupid? I'm a fool, Hans says. They work their way through Atlantis and see that Viktor Smirnov has already turned everything into a lab. A lab to the left, a lab to the right. He destroyed an ancient civilization. There's only one place he could be, in the main castle. The crew swim their way to the back and enter the main castle of Atlantis. Sitting in the middle of the castle is the activated Heart of the Sea, beating like a real heart, sending waves through the water, allowing one to breathe.
Took you long enough, you adultery fools.
Smirnov says.
You're too late. It was all a distraction, and you fell for it.
Fell for what, the crew says. The heart of the sea was just a distraction for my true plan, the Arcon stone. Victor Smirnov holds up a big purple glowing stone. He uses the stone to command the beast to attack the crew.
See you around, or maybe I won't.
Smirnov opens a portal using the stone and exits through it. The crew barely make it out alive and swim back to land.
What do we do now?
Victor Smirnov, the ruler of the Void. Think of the Void as hell, but even worse. The Void is full of dark beasts and monsters commanded by one thing, the Arcon stone. And whoever wields the Arcon stone rules the Void. Victor Smirnov was created by pure evil, no mother, no father, a source of evil, the harbinger of doom. Let's rewind time a little bit. Well, not just a little bit. How about thousands and thousands of years ago, to the year 15 BC? We arrive in the Amazon rainforest to a giant temple, also known as the Arcon Temple, a temple built by the people of the Amazon that also call themselves the Arcon Warriors. Once before, Victor Smirnov grew weak, and I mean very weak. He left his stone to the people of the Amazon to protect it. So they built a giant temple to hide the stone deep within. For thousands of years, the temple thrived in peace, no problem, nothing wrong. But one dark, gloomy day, the sky grew gray, and the harbinger of doom returned to take back what was his. But the king of the Arcon Temple, Guntaro, grew hungry for the stone's power, and didn't want to give it up so easily. Victor Smirnov slayed down every last Arcon warrior, including the king, and took back what was rightfully his. Victor Smirnov returned back to the Void to grow his power. Fast forward 2,500 years to another dimension known as the Blight. The Blight is a polar opposite to the Void. Think of the Blight as heaven, light, beautiful. The home of Ludwig Hans, whose true name is Sotoris. It's also the home to the king and queen of the Blight, Goros and Hateris. For millions of years, the Blight was at peace, but there was something going on in the shadows. An inside job. One very cold night, the Blight began to change. All the green trees and leaves began to turn blue and ice cold. Out of nowhere, beasts from the Void began to break through the dimensional barrier, attacking the Blight. Victor Smirnov, now at his full power, entered the Blight in order to slay the king and queen, for he wanted their power all for himself. For days, the Blight was at war with the Void, and finally, Victor Smirnov arrived at the castle of Blight. The king and queen were already dead, and standing above their lifeless bodies was a young Ludwig Hans.
Well done, young one. You have proven yourself worthy.
Hans took a hold of Victor's hand, and they both exited to the Void. A few remaining Blight soldiers ran up to the castle and found their king and queen slain. The spirit of Hateris spoke to the remaining Blight soldiers.
Take my scroll. It is infused with the power of the Blight. For any who prove they are worthy may use its power to vanquish the darkness.
And to this day, the Blight stay cold, dark, lifeless. We return back to present day. It has now been 3 years since the start of World War II. The whole world has fallen to darkness, chaos. The dead and void beasts now roam this world. Victor Smirnov has grown to power once more. We close back in on the crew entering the city of New York, but it's not just fire and darkness around the city. An evil grows from it, a corruption. The city of corruption. Hans tells the crew that he has an old friend who he used to work with here, a friend by the name of Arthur Shaw. He tells the crew that he left something in his possession, something that they could use to stop Victor Smirnov. As they fight through the hordes of beasts and undead, they finally make their way up to the top of Fleck Industries. When they get to the top, Fleck has already been killed by the corruption. Hans walks over to Fleck's dead body and pulls out the skull of Blight. This is what we can use to stop Smirnov, Hans says. But the skull is not the same. It is supposed to be glowing a bright blue, but now it grows dark, with a black mat around it. The skull has been corrupted, said Hans. With this corruption around it, we cannot use it. Hans thinks for a little while, and comes up with a plan. There's only one place I know we can cure this corruption. It won't be easy to get there.
What do you mean?
Aaron says. Hans looks at Aaron. Do any of you fancy time travel? The crew arrive back at their safe house in Germany. Hans immediately gets to work on a gadget, a machine of some sorts. For weeks he's building it, putting it together, and finally it's finished. I present to you the Time Warper.
A time water.
Aaron asks. A Time Warper. You see, there's only one place in time that this kind of corruption can be cured, and it's a long time ago, Hans says. You're telling me that this wacky machine is going to take us back in time? Yes, Hans says with excitement. The crew step into the Time Warper.
So, how the hell does this thing work?
Aaron asks. Han replies sarcastically. Don't worry about it. Hans flips the switch and the crew are teleported back in time. To Middle Earth. The time of sins. When the teleportation process was complete, the crew fell out of the Time Warper. As they look around, a giant castle sat atop of a giant mountain. They make their way into a small lake town where they are greeted by an old man. Hans speaks to the old man, asking him how they get up to the castle. Well, the only way to get up there is by boat, the old man replies. I shall boat you there, but first, there have been orcs raiding this small town. If you can clear the rest of the orcs out, I'll gladly take you to the castle. Orcs, said the crew. What the hell are orcs? The crew fight off the remaining orcs, and the old man allows them to board their boat and boats them to the castle. When the crew arrive at the castle, it's quiet, but then, boom, overrun with beasts from the Middle Ages. Orcs, goblins, and out of nowhere, the undead, void beasts. How the hell does he know we're here? Hans says. We must get this done quickly. Hans enters the castle and places the skull of Blight on the pedestal of kings and begins to chant. As the other crew members fight off the beasts, the spell is complete. The skull has been vanquished of its corruption. Come on, let's go back to the Time Warper, Hans yells. But before they get there, a younger Victor Smirnov rises from the void. Well, 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 my old friend, Victor says. Leave, I dare you. The crew finally make it back to the Time Warper, but right before they teleport, Victor chants an ancient spell. The crew teleport back to present day. But something doesn't feel right. Something has changed. The crew takes a moment to breathe. Time travel is not easy on the heart or the mind. What has he done? What has he done? Han whispers to himself. Hans walks out of the bunker outside and looks up in the sky. He's done it. That son of a bitch. The other crew members follow behind.
What the hell is going on?
Aaron says. The spell that Victor cast closed off multiple time periods that the crew had already been to. Hans thinks to himself for a minute. It doesn't matter. We must keep moving. Now that we have the skull and it's clear of its corruption, we can go to work on accessing its true potential to stop Victor Smirnov. The crew lay low for a few days. No noise from outside. Quiet. Almost too quiet. We have sat long enough. It's time to go, Han says.
Where the hell are we going exactly?
Aaron says. To a place you might remember. Think of it as a new beginning. Noir Anfang. When the crew ride back to Duke facility, they notice that it's completely different. Some of the same elements, but completely different.
Why the hell are we back here?
Aaron says, with a confused look on his face, as well as the other crew members. There's something here that wasn't here last time. I can feel it. Something we need to access the skull's full potential. The crew try to ask more questions, but Hans insists that they move on, and to trust him. The crew enter the Duke facility and enter the underground lab. The underground lab has changed. Not the way it looks, but how clean and neat it was. They hear a faint yelling coming from the back of the lab.
Hello? Who's there? Please, not the undead again.
The crew walk to the back to investigate and find a small kind of capsule with a blinking light on top. The crew approach the capsule and asks who's inside. The individual inside claims to be an old scientist who worked here and tried to escape by running into this teleportation pod. The pod was out of power, hence the blinking light. We're here for one thing and one thing only, the elemental rod. Do you have this? Hans asks. The elemental rod, the individual says. Why yes, it's in here with me. We keep all our prized possessions in here, except one that I keep in my house. I'll make you a deal, the individual says. If you can retrieve my precious artifact from my house and bring me a new power core to power my teleporter, I will give you the elemental rod. The crew agrees with the compromise and hunts for this power core and the artifact the individual talks about. They find the power core in an old loading truck in the back of the facility and bring it to the individual. Great, great. The power is restored, but I still need my artifact, the individual says. Here's the key to the house in the back of the facility. I hide my artifact under the staircase. The crew takes the key into the house at the back of the facility. When they open the locked chest, they find something truly horrifying.
What? This cannot be.
Aaron yells. Sitting in the bottom of the box was the heart of the sea. I thought we destroyed this, Oliver says. Why don't we all calm down, Hans says. It doesn't matter anymore. We all know what the heart of the sea was used for. It was just a distraction for Victor Smirnov. It has no use to us anymore. Let's just return it to this man and get the elemental rod and move on. They return the heart of the sea to the individual, and the individual tosses the elemental rod from a little window in the teleporter. Before we go, Hans asks, "Who are you?" "Me? Oh, it's no big deal, but my name is Schmidt Wilhelm." The crew's eyes light up, and Aaron runs straight for the pod and tries to open the door. "We have to kill him! We have to kill him!" Aaron says. Before he could open the door, the teleporter disappears.
That son of a bitch.
If you haven't noticed, Aaron, we have a bigger problem, not some German scientist. With Aaron being disappointed, the crew exit the Duke facility and move on. Before we move on, let's talk about the Skull of Blight, how to activate it, and how to access its true power. Only a true loyal warrior of the Blight can activate it, Hans not being one of them, for he killed his parents, and the other 3 crew members being mortals. There are 3 components needed to activate the Skull of Blight. Number 1, the Elemental Rod. The Elemental Rod was forged in the Blight by ancient blacksmiths. The power infused into the rod gives it the ability to resurrect one dead thing, but only once. The second component being the Blight Sprite. The Blight Sprite is a powerful source that can only be conjured by powerful Blight magic. And the last component is the Bloodstone, solidified blood of a powerful soul. With all these combined together, the skull will reactivate and show its true power. The crew return to their bunker in Germany. For days, Hans just sits and stares at the rod. "I can feel it. I can feel it," Hans says. "Can feel what?" the crew asks. "I know where we must go next. The next component. We must travel back to Russia. Another place y'all might be familiar with. A particular castle, but now in ruins." It takes a few weeks to finally reach Russia. As they cut through an overgrown forest, they walk onto Castle Smirnov. But that is not its name anymore. Time has changed itself. The castle, all destroyed, consumed by time. Vines, roots, trees grow inside. They head up to the top floor where the computer used to be and find an interesting altar. "There! I knew it! The Blight Sprite," Hans says. Hans walks up to the Blight Sprite, but a barrier surrounds it, for he cannot touch it, nor anyone can. They hear a faint voice speak to them.
Please, free me. Help me.
The crew looks around, not knowing where the voice comes from. The voice was all around them. That voice belonged to the new owner of this castle, Nicholas II, the son of King Nicholas. When King Nicholas I passed away, he left the castle for his son. His son pondered in blight magic. He shut everybody out of the castle, and for his entire life, he tried to conjure a blight sprite. But by doing this, it killed him and trapped his soul within the castle. Nicholas II begged the crew to free him, for he regrets ever conjuring this sprite. He told the crew, if they free him, they can have the sprite for themselves. For hours, the crew tried to figure out how to free his soul from the castle. And finally, Hans pulled out the elemental rod. Hans walked over to the corner and cast a spell over the rod, an enchantment that allowed the rod to be used twice, not once. Hans held the rod over the barrier, and the barrier disappeared. The lost soul of Nicholas II was free, and the blight sprite was theirs. The crew camp out inside the ruined castle for a few days. There was no point to return to the bunker in Germany. It would just be a waste of time. They've heard nothing from Victor Smirnov for over 6 months. One late night, the crew is sleeping. While Hans was sleeping, he has a vision, dark vision, showing the Bloodstone, the last component to activate the Skull of Blight. He sees a beach, palm trees, and a dark cloaked figure chanting, Hans jumps up from his sleep, waking the other crew members. "We must go. Now. No questions." The crew mount their horses and ride to the shoreline of Russia. There, they come upon a small civilization of what was left of Russia. "We need a boat. Now," Hans asks. The town people answer his request with a small fishing boat, and the crew take off to a small island in the Indian Ocean. The crew boat for days and days, bad storms brewing over them. Waves hitting the small fishing boat like rhinos. But they finally make it through the eye of the storm and come upon Libertalia, the lost island of paradise. "Alright, Avery. Where's your tomb?" Han whispers to himself. "How do you know about all this stuff?" Aaron asks. Quite suspicious if you ask me, Akio says. I studied in unnatural artifacts and beings my whole life. If it weren't for me, you would all be dead by now, Hans yells. Crew, not knowing of his true nature, shakes it off like nothing, and continue on deeper into the island. The crew come upon Henry Avery's homestead that he built on this island. I bet you anything his tomb is somewhere under his house, alongside all his treasures, and the final component for the skull. They search through Avery's house and find a small lever that opens a hidden basement door leading straight down into Avery's tomb. When they enter, they are greeted with piles and piles of gold, and in the center of it all, the Bloodstone. But guarding the Bloodstone was the restless spirit of Henry Avery. The crew fight off Avery as Hans grabs the Bloodstone. Crew fight their way back to the shoreline and escape the grasps of Henry Avery. We have done it. All the components.
What do we do now?
Aaron asks. We kill that nasty scum, once and for all. While on the small fishing boat, the crew surround the components and the skull. Alright? Well, what are we waiting for? Let's do it, Oliver says. No, we must activate it at the right time, when Victor is at his weakest. We must go to him. Now. Where the hell would that be? Akio asks. I have an idea, Hans says. Even though it's just the four of us, it's gonna be like a war. A war of sins. The crew arrive at the Appalachian Mountains, where Victor Smirnoff's fortress lies. So this is where he's been all along, Aaron says, building him a nice little home. He's up there. I can feel it, Hans says. The crew walk up the massive staircase to the gate of the fortress, climb over the wall, and enter. Cold, dark, ice covering the walls of the fortress.
Finally, you've arrived. I didn't think you would make it this far.
A portal opens, and the crew are taken to the main chamber of the fortress. And waiting for them there, Victor Smirnoff. Smirnoff takes the form of a giant ice demon and attacks the crew. For hours, they fight off Smirnoff and finally drop him to his knees. Hurry! The skull! The components! Give them to me! Now! Hans yells. Hans puts the components together and activates the Skull of Blight. Right before Hans uses the skull to kill Victor, he says his last words.
I trained you well, youngling.
What the hell is he talking about? Aaron yells. Hans holds the skull up to Victor, and a beam shoots out of the skull, turning Victor Smirnoff to ashes. As Victor Smirnoff flows away in the air, the Arconstone falls to the floor with a thud. Hans slowly walks over to the Arconstone and picks it up. Finally, mine. The other crew members slowly back up.
What the hell is this?
Aaron says, for so long, I wanted to wield such a weapon. For so long, I had deceived the strongest being in the universe. And now, I have killed him, and all is mine. What the hell are you talking about? The crew yells. You're a bunch of fools. I'm sorry. I won't kill you, but you won't last long. We were good friends, but now I must go to my true calling. Hans raises up in the air, holding the Skull of Blight and the Arconstone, and teleports away. The ground starts to shake and crumble, and the three remaining crew members run for their lives out of the fortress. They run to a small patch of woods on the outskirts of the fortress and watch it crumble and fall. That son of a bitch. We trusted him, put our lives in his hand, and this whole time, lies. As the crew watches the fortress fall, a small ball of electricity appears behind them. The same capsule that was at the Duke facility teleports in behind them.
Ah, yes. Mine old friends. Ha ha ha.
Wilhelm.
Aaron lunges at Wilhelm. Oliver and Akeo hold him back. I don't know what you think I've done or why you hate me, Wilhelm says, but we need to get out of here. Now hurry, into the teleporter. The crew get in the teleporter with Wilhelm and teleport away. The teleporter takes them back to the German bunker, their old safe house, just like it was. The crew all take a seat and take a breather. So how the hell did you know where we were, Wilhelm? Aaron says with sarcasm. Well, you see, I was having strange dreams. My death, a big Russian man by the name of Victor Smirnoff, cutting my head off in my own home. The dream, it felt so real. I had to see for myself. In my dream, I had a vision of giant mountains, so I used my teleporter and went there, and there you were. Well, if you think we're just gonna let you hang with us, you're not, Aaron says. But I can help, Wilhelm says. Oliver and Akeo try to talk to Aaron, but Aaron's not having it. Let's just get some fucking sleep, Aaron says. There you go, Wilhelm. There's a nice cold floor for you to sleep on. 5 years go by, the crew living in the German bunker the whole time. Finally, one day, Wilhelm steps up. From the stories you told me, Ludwig Hans being some powerful being trying to take over the world, we can't just sit here and do nothing. Then what do you suppose we do, Aaron says. During my studies on unnatural things, I read about some temple in the Amazon rainforest, built thousands and thousands of years ago. We need a place to start. Why don't we go there? Apparently it's called the Arcon Temple. Yeah, we've heard of it. Hans always talked about it, Akeo says. Well, let's go there. It has to be our fate. The crew journeys cross country and finally make it to the Amazon rainforest. As they cut through the thick jungle, they come upon the Arcon Temple. Damn it, it's sealed, Oliver says. Don't worry, there must be a way to open it, Wilhelm replies. They search the grounds and find 3 pressure plates that must be stood on. The stone doors to the temple slowly open, and they enter. A dark portal at the back of the temple that looks like it's been open for thousands of years. They hesitate, but they walk through the portal. When they reach the other side of the portal, they enter what looks like the Blight and the Void combined. When Victor Smirnov took Hans into his hands, Victor created a pocket dimension, a dimension combining the Void and the Blight into one. Here is where Victor trained and nursed Hans for thousands of years. In the middle of the dimension was a giant pillar, a pillar shaped like the Arkenstone. They enter the pillar, and inside, in the middle, lie an old book, the Book of Fate. Wilhelm grabs the book and opens it. Before he could read it, the ground started to shake. What is it, a trap, Akeo says? No, Wilhelm replies, just a defense mechanism. We need to get out of here, now. Before we continue, let's talk about Victor Smirnov training Hans and taking him under his wing. Hundreds and thousands of years ago, Hans was living in the Blight and Victor in the Void. No conflict came between the two, but at one point, Hans was beginning to feel weak, like his powers didn't mean anything. He didn't feel respected by any of the people of the Blight, and they only respected his parents, Goros and Hateris. Hans, feeling weak, started to ponder in void magic. By doing this, he summoned Victor Smirnov. Hans and Smirnov talked for days, Hans explaining to Smirnov how he didn't feel respected, how his powers felt weak. For this, Victor devised a plan for Victor to finally vanquish the Blight and to be the only truly powerful one in the entire universe. He told Hans, if you kill your mother and father, I will give you the ultimate power, the Arkenstone. Victor fed into Hans' hunger for power, and in doing this, Hans successfully killed his mother and father, Goros and Hateris. Victor Smirnov then took Hans to the pocket dimension, the Blight and the Void combined into one, and trained him for thousands of years. Victor thought he had Hans fooled, but Hans also had a plan of his own, to kill Victor Smirnov and take the Arkenstone for himself, and him become the truly most powerful being in the universe. After thousands of years of living together, a war in their own dimension broke loose. Hans and Victor fought for months and months. Hans, somehow being victorious, struck Smirnov down and made him weak. Victor used the last remaining of his powers to banish Hans from this dimension and any other dimension. Victor sat in his dimension for thousands of years, recuperating his power. The crew exits the portal back to the Arcon Temple. The book, what is it? Says Aaron. The Book of Fate, it says. Wilhelm opens it. Writing starts to appear on the pages. Atlantis, Wilhelm says. The portal starts to shake. They turn around. The Void and the Blight start spreading across the ground. The crew runs out of the temple. What the hell is going on? Oliver yells. Hans. He's spreading the Blight and the Void throughout this world, and eventually it'll corrupt the entire universe. We have to stop him now. The book is telling us to go to Atlantis. Atlantis? Why would we need to go back there, Akio says. We need to go now before this corruption takes over the entire universe. The poor souls that get taken by it. The souls of the damned. The crew venture back to the Atlantic Ocean, like they did long before. What the hell happened here? There's no ocean, Aaron says. Strange. No labs either, Akio says. That's not entirely true, Wilhelm said. I have labs here, but they weren't underwater. They were above ground. My plan was to use the Heart of the Sea to make underground labs, but that's before the outbreak started. Yeah, the outbreak that you started, Aaron says. That I started? I didn't do anything, Wilhelm said. You used the Heart of the Sea to test on humans and bring them back to life, Aaron yells. I did no such thing, Wilhelm says. All I tested on was plants and small animals. I didn't cause the outbreak, Victor Smirnov did. He used the Arkenstone to raise the dead. I saw that in my dream as well. The ground began to shake. The corruption is growing faster and faster. The book says we need to recharge the Heart of the Sea. That's why it hasn't been working. The crew make their way through the now waterless Atlantis. They make their way to the giant trident statue in the middle. The Book of Fate tells them to place the heart on the statue and chant an ancient spell, made by the gods of Atlantis. Done! The Heart of the Sea is recharged. Where to now, book? And for the last time, let's talk about the Book of Fate. There are no known origins of the Book of Fate, only that Victor Smirnov found it deep within the void. Remember, Victor Smirnov does not have a mother or father or any descendants. He was created by the pure evil of the void. The book itself isn't evil, though. The book actually leads you on your designated path to success. Every time Victor Smirnov tried to use it, it would tell him nothing. Just blank pages. It is said that the Book of Fate only reveals itself to the people who actually need it. The crew leave the lost city of Atlantis. Wilhelm reads the next steps in the book. Wait, no way, Wilhelm says. My old lab? How many fucking labs do you have, Aaron says. Well, I was a pretty wealthy man. My parents were supporters of Adolf Hitler, after all. We need to go to the lab in Holland Village. I don't own that lab anymore. I sold it long before the outbreak started. Let's go then. We need to get there now, to the village of Holland. When the crew arrive at Old Holland Village, the corruption has already spread there too. If I remember, there's a lever in the small house that opens the door to the lab. Wilhelm finds the lever and opens the door. Ah, just like I remember, he says. The book tells the crew that they need to purify the heart of the sea. Purify the heart of the sea, Wilhelm says. Yes. I remember. When I used to own this lab, I was working on my biggest project yet, the purifier machine. You would put a so-called corrupted item inside, and it would purify the corruption. The crew walk down into the lab. It looks untouched. Wilhelm walks over to the old chest that has a beam shooting out of the top with infinite weapons. Oh yes, I remember this project. Took me and Ziegler years to build this. We made hundreds of them, you know, spread them throughout Germany. Other countries stole them, but I'm the true maker of them. They walk up to the purifier machine and put the heart of the sea inside. The machine starts to shake and rumble, and after a few minutes, something pops out. The heart of the universe. My God, Wilhelm says. Again, the ground starts to shake. They hear a loud voice. How are you still alive? Hans yells. No matter, the corruption is almost complete. Hans traps the crew in a small pocket of the lab. The crew sees nothing but a small blinking light bulb that was left after the destruction. No! We're so close! For days, the crew is trapped in a small pocket of the lab, nothing but the few rations they had with them to survive on. Every once in a while, they hear roars, growls outside, the ground shaking as well. What the hell is going on out there, Oliver says. I can't read this damn book in the dark, Wilhelm yells. For hours, they drift in and out of sleep. When all hope was lost, the heart of the universe began to float. Wait, look! Look, everyone, Wilhelm says. The heart of the universe floats towards the debris, blocking the exit, and melts away the rock and metal. The heart floats back into Wilhelm's hand, and he reads the next and final steps. It says, face your enemy. Let's end this. It's time. The end of sins. The crew walk out of the lab to see that the world has fallen into chaos, floating islands around them, the ground breaking apart, and in the center of it all, Ludwig Hans' massive fortress. They make their way up to the fortress and face Hans for the final time. You are too late. The world has fallen to darkness, and now I rule all. The crew begin to fight Ludwig Hans in a massive battle. What felt like hours was only a few minutes, for the heart of the universe gave the crew an immense amount of strength and power. What is this? What is this artifact you possess? Hans yells as he falls to the floor. The Book of Fate begins to glow and open. The crew look at the book and read the last steps and look at each other. It has to be done, Aaron says. The crew grab the Arcon stone and the skull of Blight from Hans. The Book of Fate creates a force field around the crew. The crew holds the Arcon stone, the skull of Blight, and the heart of the universe together, and it begins to fuse into one. What are you doing? Yells Hans. Stop this! All my hard work! The components finish fusing together and float into Wilhelm's hand. The Stone of Fate, a bright green glowing stone. Akio, Aaron, Oliver, and Wilhelm take each other's hands and begin to rise in the air alongside the Stone of Fate. The stone begins to suck their souls inside. By doing this, the stone is now at its full power. No! What is this? Yells Hans. The stone begins to glow brighter than the sun. The universe begins to collapse around Hans. No! The Stone of Fate sucks everything into it. Nothing but pure darkness. No time. Nothing. Not one bit of light. A small purple light appears. Then boom, a giant black hole appears. The black hole begins to create a whole new universe, free of all the evil, no dimensions, just one universe. Akio Adachi, Aaron Fitz, Oliver Wolfgang, and Schmidt Wilhelm sacrificed their souls to create a new universe. the universe vanquished of all evil, a true new beginning.
Or did they?